on Saturday night, live from the UK, Church House, Westminster. Danny, Dangerous Dynamite DuBois, learned a most valuable lesson in boxing, and we're here to talk about it.
So that'll give him a bit of energy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good night. It's all over.
What's good, YouTube? This is STORMYBMAN, and I'm back with a final word on Seek and Destroy, the heavyweight match that took place November 28th in the UK between Danny DuBois and Joyce. Before we get started, I'd like to say shout out to the LDBC, the Lions Den boxing community, new media, and Liberated Perspective, a third eye view of the world. For more content like this, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. This past Saturday saw Danny DuBois and Joyce competing as two up-and-coming prospects in the heavyweight division for the right to move forward to become a world-class contender. These two men brought records in the ring of 11-0 for the Juggernaut, Joyce, and 15-0 for Danny DuBois, Dynamite Danny. This was the type of fight, as I had said going in, would be reminiscent of something that took place in the early 90s, a battle between Merciless Ray Mercer and Tommy the Duke Morrison, two men whose paths had crossed in the amateurs, but as professional heavyweights, the two decided to face off to see who could go forward as a true heavyweight contender and who would remain a prospect. That being said, we were able to see on that night the progress of each fighter and what had brought them to the point where they met. On this night, November 28th, Saturday of 2020, an example was set once again where we had an older fighter in the Juggernaut, Joyce, taking on the young upstart, which is Danny DuBois. Now listen, DuBois looked like the future of the division. With his punching prowess and his chiseled looks, he looked to be a most formidable opponent for Mr. Joyce. At only 23 years of age, the sky is the limit for Danny. But the Juggernaut, who has an Olympic silver medal in his background, was able to have a little bit of something to say about that. He brought into the match with him some vital ring experience, having taken on opponents over his last several bouts. The Juggernaut has faced the likes of Bermane Stiverne, Alexander Ustinov, Bryant Jennings, and Michael Wallace. Wallace being the least of those opponents, but with Stavern, a former heavyweight champion, Ustinov, another fighter who brought in a stellar record, and Bryant Jennings, who had challenged Vladimir Klitschko for the heavyweight championship. The Juggernaut was able to find out that he belonged in the division. He belonged amongst the big punchers, the big boys. And that experience proved very vital in this matchup. Though DuBois seemed to cut through his opponents, the challenges that DuBois had faced weren't enough to give him the ring experience of what to do under certain circumstances, which is why Stormy is always speaking about fighters having more knockouts than they've had fights. Just because you can knock someone out doesn't mean that you know how to fight, how to box, how to handle yourself under circumstances of adversity, as well as handling yourself with the ability and knack to make adjustments on the fly. Because in a bout that is taking place live, that's on the fly. If things happen to not be going your way, you may have to find yourself making adjustments. And that is what we look at when we're talking about fighters making the next step. Joyce found that he didn't want to trade punches with DuBois because DuBois is very much a formidable fighter when it comes to that, and mixing it up could have found him either on the canvas, if not KO'd. What Joyce was able to find was something out of the pages of boxing history and boxing rule book: the jab, the most important punch in boxing. The reason the jab is the most important punch in boxing is everything starts with it. In the midst of any action that's taking place, the jab can pull you through. That everything can be finished up with the jab. You can rest with the jab. You can occupy the opponent even when you're not looking to do anything of damning nature. Right away, the jab can be used as a range-seeking operative weapon. Joyce found that against DuBois, who readily complied by not moving his head. The lack of head movement in this instance cost DuBois mightily. Now, the fight ended with DuBois suffering an injury to his eye and not being able to continue on. But the thing about this, where there's a teaching moment for Danny DuBois, is this: you're not gonna knock everyone out, but the one thing you can do is always build the blocks toward a knockout, or build the blocks for breaking an opponent down. Regardless of what type of power you may have, it is always good to put stock in breaking an opponent down. If he happens to crumple while you're in the process of doing that, great. That means that they weren't able to deal with what you have to offer. But under this circumstance, Danny's answer to his trouble was to jump out at the start of each round and try to attack Joyce in a manner which he thought he would be overwhelming or overpowering, which didn't work efficiently at all, because Joyce, being a big man himself and experienced and adept at taking shots, being able to absorb some punishment as well as dish it, he was able to provide just enough opposition for DuBois, and DuBois began to tire. With no immediate head movement from the onset, as he began to tire, he was not able to get out of the way of the shots of Joyce. And the Juggernaut, as his name indicates, became an ever oncoming presence in there. Behind his stiff jab, even with hardly anything else landing, maybe occasional right hand, maybe occasional left to the body, but the jab was prominent, and Danny didn't have any answers for that. So it's back to the drawing board for Daniel DuBois. Hopefully, he recovers from his injuries and can get back to learning his craft, because at the age of 23, he still is young enough to bounce back and take this on as an extreme learning experience for himself. But he may do himself a service by learning the most important factor of all from this fight. Develop your own jab, son. Learn to move that head. Keep your head off center line. I've observed his fights in the past. To take away this lesson about the jab is to follow in the steps of someone I mentioned earlier, Merciless Ray Mercer, who had fought Larry Holmes, the aging veteran former heavyweight champion of the world. Mercer thought he would go in and just simply overpower Holmes, and Holmes beat the crap out of Mercer over 12 rounds and took Mercer's WBO title from him. It's something to be said about that left jab. And DuBois, as strong as he is, as an imposing presence that he presents himself, would do tremendous service by adapting and taking on that weapon for himself, utilizing the jab to set everything up. You can use the jab as a piston-fired weapon, a probing weapon, a telephone pole-like weapon to stop an opponent in his tracks, to be able to pulverize them, bust them up, so to speak. Make that left hand work. You're definitely a puncher, and you can follow up with anything off of that. But that helps build the blocks toward breaking an opponent down. You have to be efficient with it. You have to be direct with it. And you have to have a game plan. But move that head as well. Develop entire upper body movement. Get your skill sets under control. Because as a young man, these things should be natural. You shouldn't want to get hit. You shouldn't want the opponent to lay a glove on you. So become more defensive. Hide your chin, okay? And get that head off center line. As for the Juggernaut, we'll see him soon. He may even be in a position of challenging for a title in 2021. And I'd like to see that, because the Juggernaut, being 6'6", with a 70+ inch reach and having a chin of steel, he's going to present some problems to some men in the heavyweight division, because there are not a lot of good heavyweights out there. You have some guys that are pretenders and front runners. You have some guys that are simply runners. And then you have some guys who are not as skilled as they may need to be, being considered at the top of the division. With he being 35 years old, the clock is ticking for Joyce, but he may be in a position to win a title. The last thing that I like to say about this fight is it was competitive for a moment until the eye of DuBois began to swell, and his corner, their instructions and everything may have been questionable, but at the same time, with Pero, they didn't know how to make the proper adjustments, and they should also take some of the blame in this. There are lessons to be learned by all. At the top of the division in the heavyweight game, it is not easy. And fighters can find themselves out of there within a couple of rounds. With dangerous punchers out there, you never know what would be on the horizon, but you have to be prepared for everything. So my message to Danny DuBois is to go back to the gym when you're well. Work on your skill set. Start fighting opponents who can give you rounds, guys that you will have to be mindful of your own defense, guys you will have to hunt down and break down, and use that jab. It's the best thing you could have going for yourself. Take a page from Joyce and learn your craft. This is STORMYBMAN. Those are my thoughts and final thoughts on the fight that took place between Joyce and Daniel DuBois. Until the next time we speak, peace. Everyone, remain safe.